She played her heart out. What happened next? Silence the whole room. Welcome to the channel. We're so glad you're here. If this story moved you, take a moment to tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. We love hearing from our community around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss tomorrow's special story, one that just might stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Your voice matters here, and your presence means everything. The lights in the school auditorium dimmed slightly, casting a soft glow over the glossy black piano at center stage. Eighth in the lineup, Lena Carter stepped out from behind the curtain, her small frame barely making a sound on the wooden floor. She was only 8 years old, but the look in her eyes held more emotion than most adults dared to show. Her white, cotton dress, pressed earlier that afternoon by her mom, swayed gently as she walked, and her hair was braided just the way she liked. Neat, but not trying too hard. She paused before the piano, adjusted the bench like she had practiced so many times at home, and placed her hands carefully on the keys. The moment her fingers touched the ivory, it was as if the room shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a subtle kind of reverence, like something sacred had just begun. Lena's piece didn't have a name. When she talked about it, at home she only ever called it the one that sounds like missing someone. And that's exactly how it felt. The notes were soft at first, almost shy, stretching out like questions in the air. It was a melody made of feeling, not something she'd learned from a book or a music teacher, but something she had found inside herself. Rachel Carter, sitting in the middle row, held her breath. She'd watched her daughter compose this piece night after night, tapping it out on a second-hand keyboard that cost $35 at a yard sale. It had a missing stand and a sticky G-sharp key, but Lena didn't mind. To her, it was magic. And now, that magic was filling the room, but the room didn't respond. A few parents in the back glanced at their phones. A pair of kids in the front row whispered and giggled. One judge, an older woman in a red blazer, checked her watch. The applause that had followed the glittery dance number before Lena's? Gone. Replaced by shifting chairs, rustling snack wrappers, and a silence that wasn't reverent. It was indifferent. And then, from somewhere behind Rachel, came the words, "That's the girl with the single mom." Just a whisper, just loud enough. Rachel's body tensed, her stomach dropped, her hands clutched the seat beneath her like it could keep her grounded. She didn't need to turn around. She already knew the voice, not the person, but the type. The kind of person who'd never had to explain why their kid didn't bring cupcakes on birthday week, or why their coat sleeves were rolled up because they were last year's size. On stage, Lena continued to play, unaware or maybe just unwilling to let it stop her, but the crowd had already moved on. Not out loud, not obviously, but in the quiet way that stings worse than words. And still, she played. Rachel Carter couldn't move. Her daughter was still playing, her small fingers dancing across the keys with aching grace, but all Rachel could hear was that whisper echoing in her head. That's the girl with the single mom. It wasn't just the words. It was the weight behind them. Rachel had spent years learning to tune out judgment, the way people looked at her old sedan with the dented bumper, the way other moms offered tight smiles at PTA meetings, but never asked her to coffee. She thought, she'd gotten used to it, but tonight it wasn't about her. It was about Lena, and that made it hit deeper, sharper. She sat frozen, her hands clenched around the fabric of her thrifted jeans, her breath shallow. The air in the auditorium suddenly felt heavier, like it was pressing down on her chest. Around her, parents scrolled through their phones. Kids snuck candy from crinkly wrappers, and one of the judges flipped through their score sheet like they were waiting for the next act to start. And there, in the middle of it all, was Lena, still playing, still pouring her heart into every note, like the sound of the room didn't matter. Rachel wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up right then and there and shout, "Do you even hear her? Do you see what she's doing? Do you have any idea how brave this is?" But her voice caught in her throat. Because she knew it wouldn't change anything. This town, this place, had already decided who Lena was. They saw her as Rachel's daughter, the kid with off-brand sneakers and a second-hand lunchbox, the one who didn't go to summer art camp or take lessons from Miss Brenda at the studio downtown. And now, even with her daughter sitting at that piano playing something more honest and beautiful than anything that had come before it, no one cared. Rachel's vision blurred. She blinked hard, trying not to cry, not here, not in front of these people. But her body betrayed her. Her chest ached, and her throat burned. She looked at Lena, still sitting tall at the piano bench. Still focused, still finishing what she started. That's when Rachel saw it, just for a second, in the flicker in her daughter's expression. A glance toward the crowd, a pause in her breath. She was starting to feel it too. The emptiness, the silence. And Rachel hated herself for it, for bringing her here, for letting her believe they'd listen, for not being able to protect her from a world that judged before it ever bothered to see. She wanted to run, grab Lena, wrap her up in her arms, and disappear. But her legs wouldn't move. All she could do was sit there, trapped in a storm of shame, anger, and helpless love, and watch her daughter finish the most important performance of her life, to the sound of nothing. Lena's final note hung in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. And then, silence. Not the kind that comes from awe or reverence. The kind that comes when people have already decided not to care. She bowed, just like her mom had taught her. Back straight, eyes up. And then glanced out at the crowd, searching for something. A smile, a nod, a single clap. But there was nothing. Someone coughed. A chair creaked. A judge picked up a pen and scribbled without even looking up. And from where Rachel sat, it felt like time stopped. Lena held the bow for a second too long, like maybe she was trying to will someone into seeing her. Then she slowly backed away from the piano and disappeared into the wings. Rachel's heart cracked. She reached for her bag, already preparing to go backstage, to scoop her daughter up and whisper 100 things she needed to hear. That she was brilliant, that she mattered, that none of this meant anything, when something shifted. From the very last row of the auditorium, a man stood up. It was subtle, quiet. No one noticed him at first, not the parents still scrolling, not the judges already flipping to the next name on the list. But Rachel noticed. He was tall, older, maybe in his 60s, dressed in a simple gray suit that didn't look expensive, just dignified. He wasn't holding a phone. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just watching the stage, and then he moved down the aisle, one step at a time, slow, steady, like he was walking through a cathedral. A few heads turned. Someone whispered, "Who is that?" Even the judges looked confused. One of them half stood, then sat back down. Rachel didn't move. She couldn't. There was something about the way he walked, calm, with purpose, that made the air in the room tighten. He reached the front and turned to the panel of judges. His voice, when he spoke, was smooth and commanding, like someone who didn't have to raise it to be heard. "Excuse me," he said. "Would it be all right if I borrowed the microphone for just a moment?" The entire auditorium froze. One of the student volunteers looked around, unsure, then slowly handed him the mic. He walked to center stage. "I wasn't supposed to be here tonight," he began. "My flight back to New York got canceled, so I came to see my granddaughter perform. But what I heard tonight," he paused, eyes scanning the audience. "What I heard stopped me cold." Rachel leaned forward, barely breathing. "My name is Professor William Harlow. I taught piano for over 30 years at Juilliard. I've heard thousands of performances, and very few have hit me the way that little girl's music just did." The room shifted, and for the first time that night, people started to listen. The silence that followed his question was heavier than before. No one quite knew what to do. The judges looked at one another, then back at the man in the gray suit. One of them, a younger guy in a maroon blazer, gave a hesitant nod. Slowly, a student usher handed the microphone over. The man took it gently as if it were something fragile. Then he turned to face the audience. "My name is Professor William Harlow. he said, his voice steady, smooth, the kind that carries weight without needing to shout. I wasn't planning to be here tonight. My flight was canceled. I came only to watch my granddaughter perform. A few murmurs moved through the crowd. But what I heard just now, he continued, stopped me in my tracks. The room leaned in. I've spent over 40 years teaching piano at Juilliard. I've mentored symphony soloists, composers, even film scorers. And in all that time, very few pieces have reached me the way that young girl's music just did. The hush deepened. People who had been half watching now sat forward. One judge quietly set down her pen. Professor Harlow turned toward the edge of the stage. Lena, he said softly, did you write that piece yourself? From the shadows, Lena nodded. Barely. Her small hand still gripped the music folder to her chest like it might protect her. He smiled. Not wide, not performative, just kind. That, he said, turning back to the crowd, wasn't just music. That was a voice. That was art. A few gasps rippled through the audience. Someone near Rachel whispered the word Juilliard like they had only ever seen it in a movie. Then he looked back at Lena. With your permission, he said gently, do you be willing to play it again? And, may I accompany you? Rachel's breath caught. She looked to her daughter, eyes wide, unsure, searching. She gave the smallest nod she could manage without bursting into tears. Lena stepped forward. Her legs trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. Professor Harlow waited at the piano, letting her sit first. He didn't take over the bench. He simply sat beside her, hands hovering just above the keys, ready, and then Lena began. This time, the notes didn't feel small. With his rich chords wrapped around her melody, it was like her song had found its echo. He didn't overpower. He supported, balanced, followed her every turn like he'd known the song his whole life. The room changed. Phones were lowered. Conversations stopped. Even the judge in the red blazer leaned forward, eyes glassy. By the time they reached the final note, a silence followed, but not the same kind. It was reverent, holding its breath. Then, as if on cue, the entire auditorium rose. Applause exploded. Cheers, shouts, whistles. They weren't just clapping for a performance. They were clapping because they had heard her. Lena stayed seated at the piano, her hands resting in her lap, her chest rising and falling with each breath like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. The clapping didn't stop. People were on their feet. Parents who hadn't even looked up before were now recording, cheering, trying to catch a glimpse of the girl who had just moved the entire room without saying a single word. And Lena, she didn't shrink this time. She turned to Professor Harlow, gave him the smallest, most genuine smile, and then stood. She bowed again, but it wasn't shy anymore. It was proud, intentional. She walked off stage taller than when she'd walked on. Rachel watched from the audience, hands pressed to her mouth, tears threatening to spill. Her baby, the girl who sat on their living room floor every night playing, a used keyboard with chipped keys, had just turned a silent room into a standing ovation. And then Professor Harlow walked over. He didn't say much at first, just smiled, extended his hand to Rachel. Your daughter, he said softly, has an extraordinary gift. That was more than talent. That was truth. Rachel couldn't speak. She just nodded, trying to hold herself together. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small card, clean, embossed, heavy with quiet promise. I work with a youth arts foundation out of New York, he said. We mentor young composers from all over the country. No audition necessary. I already heard what I needed to. Rachel stared at the card. Lena looked up at her with wide eyes, not asking with words, but asking all the same. And Rachel nodded. Thank you, baby, Lena whispered, her voice steady now. Thank you. That night, back at home, Lena didn't take off her dress. She sat on the floor under the ceiling fan, legs crossed, her keyboard in her lap, humming something new. Rachel brought over bowls of cereal. Neither of them had the energy for dinner, and they ate like it was a celebration, because it was. In the weeks that followed, things didn't magically change. Rachel still worked both of her jobs. They still lived in the same small house. Lena still wore hand-me-down sneakers and packed lunch in a plain paper bag. But something had changed, something deeper. Every Saturday, they woke up before sunrise. Rachel packed hot cocoa in a thermos, and they drove 45 miles to the conservatory. Lena never complained. She just looked out the window, music in her ears, the golden light of morning hitting her face like it belonged there. She was still Lena. Still the girl who wrote songs about rain and longing. But now she knew. Someone out there had listened. And when no one else had clapped, she hadn't stopped playing, because sometimes all it takes is one person who truly hears you, and that can change everything. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us, have you ever had a moment where someone truly saw you? Maybe it was a teacher, a stranger, a friend, someone who believed in you when no one else did. Or maybe you were that person for someone else. These stories matter. They remind us that even the quietest voice deserves to be heard, and that kindness, when shared at the right moment, can echo for a lifetime. Tell us where you're watching from, and more importantly, tell us what this story made you feel. Did it bring back a memory? Did it remind you of someone special? We read every single comment, and we truly believe that your words can inspire others too. And if you're still finding your voice, or waiting for someone to notice your light, this is your sign to keep going. You're not invisible. Your story isn't over. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's create a space where quiet voices are honored and true moments are celebrated.